A republic is not sustained by ballots alone. It's sustained by trust. And when trust breaks, no number of votes can fix the fracture. The Election Commission was meant to be the conscience of the democracy, but conscience, once captured, becomes complicity. The time has come to reclaim it, not for one party or one election, but for the idea of India itself. A flicker of, they call it the festival of democracy, but when the festival becomes a performance. When the referee forgets the rules, when faith in vote, the one act that makes us equal, begins to fracture. The Election Commission was built to be the Republic's most trusted empire, an institution beyond fear, beyond favour, beyond faction. But in the past few years, that faith has begun to fade. Selective action, silent responses, a creeping perception that neutrality is no longer its instinct. Tonight we ask the question no democracy can afford to avoid. Can the Election Commission of India truly be independent? This isn't about conspiracy, it's about credibility, and the line behind the two is thinner than we think. Part 1 of the lecture is about the founding promise, an arbiter above power. They say the true test of democracy is not how you win power, but how power behaves when it loses. And that is why in 1949, when India today stood at the edge of self-rule, the framers of our constitution did something extraordinary. They created an institution meant to stand above the storm of politics, an empire that could stare power in the eye and not blink. They called it the Election Commission of India. Independent, impartial, immovable. That was the dream. But dreams like democracies decay not in explosions but in quiet compromises. Now let's discuss the origins of a republic's referee. When Dr. B.R. Ambedkar rose in the Constituent Assembly on 15th June 1949, the hall was tense. The question before the House was simple. Should elections in free India be conducted by the government of the day or by an independent constitutional authority? Ambedkar's answer was surgical. He said, and I quote, "The safety of democracy and the fairness of elections depend upon the freedom and honesty of the Election Commission." He insisted that this body must be insulated from the executive, that its tenure and functioning must not be at the mercy of ministers or politicians. This wasn't just administrative foresight, it was a moral precaution. Ambedkar had seen what happened in Europe, how fascism crept in through captured institutions. He wanted to ensure India's democracy could never be hijacked through the ballot box itself. Next is the first election, a miracle against odds. Cut to 1952, India's first general election. 17 crore people, 85% illiterate, 324 constituencies. The world watched in disbelief, and at the helm was one man, Sukumar Singh, India's first chief election commissioner. A mathematician by training and a man of monastic discipline. No party allegiance, no fear of political bosses. Under his watch, the first election was conducted with a purity that still stuns historians. He refused to bow to political pressure, introduced symbols for illiterate voters, and completed an electoral exercise of impossible scale without a single major scandal. When the results came, Nehru's Congress swept the polls, but the real winner was the idea of an honest election. Next is the golden phase, the age of Seshan. Fast forward 4 decades, by the late 1980s, Indian elections had become carnivals of money, muscles, and manipulation. Booth capturing, fake voting, and intimidation were common headlines. Then came a man who turned the Election Commission into a household name, T.N. Seshan, a stern bureaucrat with a steel spine. He didn't beg for power, he used the power that already existed in Article 324 of the Constitution. He enforced the model code of conduct like a holy text, cancelled elections where malpractices were rampant, and made even chief ministers tremble at his notices. He once said, quote, "I'm not here to be liked, I'm here to ensure India's democracy is not auctioned at every polling booth." Session, the commission wasn't an office, it was an institution of fear, the right kind of fear. Next in discussion is the design and the dilemma. Let's pause here. Ambedkar gave the Election Commission constitutional autonomy. Session gave it moral authority, but the question remains, did we give it political independence? The truth is uncomfortable. Even though the Chief Election Commissioner enjoys protection from arbitrary removal, The other election commissioners do not. Their appointment is controlled by the executive. Their promotions, their influence often tied to political goodwill. This structural flaw has turned the EC into what many call a constitutional subordinate office, one that can act tough against smaller parties but goes soft when the ruling regime bends the code. As Justice Krishna Iyer warned in Mohinder Singh Gill versus Chief Election Commissioner, 1978 case, quote, the commission is not expected to be a mere clerk of the government. It must act as the sentinel of free elections. The question is, does it still act as one? Next in discussion is a decline of fear and the rise of favor. Today, when we see model code violations, hate speeches, misuse of state machinery, communal rhetoric, we find the Election Commission issuing notices that sound more like request than reprimands. In 2019, several complaints were filed against high-ranking leaders for communal statements and code breaches. The Commission responded with selective silence. Former CEC S.Y. Qureshi said in an interview, quote, when fear of consequence disappears, the sanctity of code collapses, unquote. And that right now is the disease. The EC is no longer feared, it is tolerated. Next, in the discussion is the question of appointments. Let's talk about the appointment system. Until 2023, the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers effectively decided who became election commissioner. No consultation, no parliamentary scrutiny. That changed temporarily in Anoop Baranwal versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court led by Justice K.M. Joseph ruled that a committee consisting of the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India should elect EC members. Justice Joseph wrote, democracy can succeed only if the institution charged with conducting elections remains insulated from the executive. But soon after, Parliament passed a law removing the Chief Justice from that committee. And just like that, judicial insulation was undone by legislative design. Once said. Once again, the referee was placed in the locker room of the players. Next is the moral unraveling. Here's the deeper danger. Institutions don't die in one moment. They erode through habits of convenience, of silence, of looking away. Every time a voter list is tampered with, complaints of fake votes go uninvestigated. Every time people see election commission officers transferred for doing their duty, the republic loses a drop of trust, and that trust, once gone, cannot be legislated back. In next act, we will step into the present. We will look at how Election Commission, the referee of the republic, has become the pawn of the players. From the wrongful deletion in Bihar to fake voters listed under the same address in Delhi, Karnataka, Telangana, fear not. From digital manipulation to data centralization. This is not merely administrative failure, it's a democratic malpractice. And the question before this court of conscience is, if the people's referee no longer plays fair, is a match still democracy? The next part is about the era of control, silence of the watchdog. There was a time when the Election Commission didn't whisper, it thundered. Today it barely clears its throat. How does an institution that once tamed prime ministers now hesitate to question them? The story of that silence is the story of the Second Republic we are quietly becoming. Next is the gradual capture. Power never seizes institutions with violence, it does it with patience. It began after Seshan. The political class realized the law gives the Election Commission power, but it doesn't give it immunity from pressure. So the playbook changed. Don't fight the referee, befriend him. Appointment processes became opaque. Transfers and the post-retirement rewards became quiet carrots. And one by one, the commissioners who once rode began to purr. Next to discuss is appointments under shadow. Let's remember what Justice K.M. Joseph wrote in Anoop Baranwal versus Union of India 2023 case. An election commission subservient to the executive is an anathema to democracy. He was right. Because today the appointments are politically choreography. In 2024 alone, when 2 election commissioners resigned abruptly within weeks, replacements were appointed in a single day without transparency, without debate, without even formal consultation. Every democracy must ask, who appoints the referee? Because he who appoints controls. Next in discussion is the Bihar SIR and the digital phantom votes. Now let's come to the ground. In Bihar, the Special Investigation Reports, SIRs, filed during the voter verification drive revealed something disturbing. Entire clusters of voters, genuine long-term residents, were deleted overnight. When they complained, they were told your names were struck off software correction, a phrase that hides a democratic crime. In some wards, hundreds of voters were found listed under the same address. In others, the same person appeared in 3 different districts and across several states: Bihar, Telangana, Delhi, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh. Names vanished by the thousands. Journalists who tried to investigate found voters deletion rates as high as 15% in urban constituencies before major elections. Now here's the thing. Every name deleted is not just a statistic. It's a silenced citizen. Next in discussion is the algorithmic election. We entered the digital age believing it would purify elections, but technology in the wrong hands can sanitize deceit. With Aadhaar linking, voter databases became integrated, not secure. Multiple reports have surfaced of automated requests for voter deletion generated without the voter's consent. In 2023, the Andhra Pradesh High Court took note of mass deletion linked to a voter management app allegedly connected to political data operations. When petitions reached the Election Commission, the response was predictable: we will look into it. And that phrase, we will look into it, has become the most powerful form of democratic denial. Now let's discuss the selective blindness. In 2019, the Commission received 11 major complaints alleging hate speech and communal campaigning by prominent leaders. Not one resulted in disqualification. In the same election, opposition candidates were served notices within 48 hours for comparatively minor infractions. When journalists questioned this imbalance, a former chief election commissioner requesting anonymity said, quote, "We used to interpret the code of conduct as a sword. Now it's being used as a shield to protect those in power," unquote. That's how capture happens, not through conspiracy, but through conditioning. Next in discussion is the fear of confrontation. Why doesn't the Commission act? Because confrontation has a cost. Standing up to a ruling party means risking transfers, investigations, or post-retirement isolation. The bureaucracy has learned one lesson too well. It's safer to serve power than to serve principle. As Justice Chelameshwar once said, institutions didn't fail because bad men occupy them. They fail because good men adapt, unquote. And that adaptation, the quiet bending of principle, is how independence dies in daylight. Now let's discuss the voices of warning. In 2017, former President Pranab Mukherjee warned during the Election Commission function. The neutrality of constitutional bodies must not only exist, but must be seen to exist. It was not just advice, it was prophecy. Because what we see today is not neutrality, it's invincibility. When citizens file RTIs about voter deletions, they get replies saying data are not available. When political parties complain of bias, the Commission says we act on merit. But merit, when selective, becomes manipulation. Next in discussion is the collapse of accountability. The deeper tragedy is that the Election Commission has no external accountability mechanism. Parliament doesn't review it, and not even its functioning. Courts hesitate to intervene mid-election. The media no longer audits its conduct with rigor. So what remains is an illusion of oversight, a shadow of scrutiny that hides the truth. As constitutional scholar Upendra Bakshi once wrote, when power becomes self-certifying, accountability becomes ceremonial. That's where we are, ceremonial democracy, masquerading as constitutional rule. Next in discussion is the crisis of trust. Let's step back for a moment. In 1952, 85% of Indians couldn't read or write. Yet they trusted the ballot. Today, we have the most illiterate electorate in our history and the least distrust in the system. Fake votes, vanished names, ghost voters, algorithms that decide legitimacy, and an election commission that watches it all with polite detachment. That's not independence, that's institutional amnesia. In the next act, we will walk into the digital battlefield, where data has replaced the danda, where elections are not stolen by thugs but by software. We will examine how electoral rolls, social media campaigns, and even targeted ads are being weaponized, not to win herds but to engineer consent. And we will ask the hardest question of all. If the process itself is compromised, does the outcome still belong to the people? The next part of this lecture is about the digital dominion, democracy in the age of data. There was a time when the power to decide elections rested in the ink on your finger. Now, it rests in the code on someone's server. The shift was silent. The consequence, seismic. Welcome to the new battlefield, where democracy is not stolen by violence, but rewritten by algorithms. Next in discussion is the promise of technology. When Election Commission introduced electronic voting machines or EVMs in the 1990s, it was a revolution. No booth capturing, no torn ballots, votes counted in hours instead of days. It was meant to be the great equalizer, the trump of efficiency over chaos. But here's what every student of power knows. Efficiency without accountability is a perfect disguise for control. Next in discussion is a closed code problem. EVMs in India are designed by public sector undertakings, Bharat Electronics Limited and ECIL. Their software code is proprietary, closed, untested by independent auditors. Even Parliament has no access to the source code. So we are told to trust, but not to verify. The Supreme Court in Subramaniam Swamy vs. Election Commission 2013 case called transparency, a cornerstone of free elections, and directed the use of VVPATs, paper trails that let voters verify their choices. Yet, even today, only a fraction of VVPAT slips are cross-verified, often one per constituency, statistically meaningless. So the system is not truly transparent, it's cosmetically transparent. Next to discuss is the algorithmic advantage. Elections today are not won on polling day, they are won in the months before in the invisible corridors of data. When Aadhaar was linked with voter rolls and social media platforms opened their APIs to politically advertisers, data became a weapon. Political parties now maintain voter profiling systems, apps that track your religion, caste, income, consumption, and voting history. They know who you are, what angers you, and what you will share before you do. This is not campaigning, this is behavioral engineering. And once again, the Election Commission is looking the other way. Let's discuss the case study, the Telangana pattern. In 2023, a petition before the Andhra Pradesh High Court alleged that an app called Seva, run by a political outfit, had unauthorized access to electoral rolls. Citizens reported voter deletions in bulk with common data patterns suggesting algorithmic interference. The Election Commission's reply: they said there was no conclusive proof. But here's the truth. When institutions stop looking for proof, the presence of proof becomes the proof of absence. The rise of the digital middleman, let's discuss that. Behind every election campaign today is an ecosystem of digital consultancies, data miners, IT vendors, and algorithmic engineers who manage narratives, suppress stories, and flood timelines. They can amplify one candidate, bury another, or make a false story trend for days. And yet, there are no campaign finance disclosures for digital operations. The model code of conduct has no real chapter on social media spending. So we are playing a 21st century war with 20th century rules. Next in discussion is the e-rolls crisis. Let's come back to the foundation, the voter roll. Across India, purification drives are deleting lakhs of voters without due process. People show up at booths and find their names gone, sometimes replaced with ghost entries. A report by the Hindu in 2024 found that in the parts of Hyderabad, over 500 voters shared a single address. In Delhi's model town, identical names appeared across 3 booths. They are not clerical errors, they are digital manipulation dressed as administrative corrections. Each deletion changes a margin, each margin changes a mandate. Now let's discuss the digital vote factories. There's a darker layer, fake identities. In several states, especially during local body polls, voter IDs have been found issued to non-existent persons. In some areas, people have even received confirmation messages for applications they never filed. The new pattern: automated generation of digital forms from centralized systems. One cyber expert working with the state commission admitted off record, if you have access to the backend database, you can do mass edits in seconds, and nobody outside would ever know. That's how fragile the world's largest democracy has become. It runs on invisible code, owned by unaccountable hands. Next in discussion is the judicial silence and the democratic vacuum. Petitions have reached courts asking for 100% VVPAT verifications, audit of source code, and third-party testing. The Supreme Court has repeatedly urged trust in the Commission, saying don't doubt every institution. But democracy is not built on trust. It's built on verifiability. When the people can't verify and the courts won't compel, who exactly safeguards the vote? Let's discuss the digital colonization of consent. Here's the deeper problem. Elections today are not just about counting votes, they're about manufacturing consent through WhatsApp, forwards, targeted memes, deepfakes, and AI generated videos. Emotions are being programmed. You no longer choose your opinion, it is served to you, optimized for your bias. And that's why this isn't merely a technological issue, it's psychological warfare. The mind has become the new ballot box. Let's discuss what the Election Commission could have done. The Commission could have established independent digital audit teams. It could have mandated open source verification for all EVM software. It could have forced disclosure of digital ad spending. It could have penalized algorithmic misinformation as electoral malpractice. But it didn't, because independence once surrendered doesn't vanish in one moment. It fades, line by line, notice by notice, silence by silence. So what is the constitutional irony? Dr. Ambedkar warned that liberty's greatest threat comes not from outsiders, but from those within the system who lose courage. Today, though, we don't fear a coup, we fear compliance, a silent, obedient, data-driven republic, where every voter is mapped, every dissent is profiled, and every institution is domesticated. Let's discuss the path forward. But the story isn't over. Reform is not a slogan, it's an act of courage. We need a constitutional commission of electoral integrity that audits technology and data use, mandatory public verification of 100% VVPAT slips, open source EVM software and independent code review, real-time transparency of digital ad spending and data analytic contracts, a whistleblower law for election officials and IT vendors. Because if we don't reform the system now, the system will soon reform us. Democracy doesn't die when votes are stolen. It dies when citizens stop believing they matter. And right now, that disbelief is spreading quietly, logically, fatally. The question we must ask: if the referee has joined the game and the game itself is coded, what remains of the republic? Now let's discuss in the next part the fourth branch, media, money, and the manufacture of mandates. In the end, elections are not about politicians, they're about the people and the promise that every voice counts the same. When institutions lose their independence, nations lose their innocence. And when citizens begin to suspect that the game is fixed, the ballot becomes a ritual, not a right. The question is no longer whether the Election Commission has power, it's whether it still has honor. That is the next hearing, and I am Amod Bidhuri. And in this courtroom of ideas, the verdict is always yours. Thank you.